Well, good morning.
I bet you didn't see this coming.
Yeah, it's time once again for Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So if you'll just change channels, you'll find Mr. Rogers.
Ooh, I
And,
left my sweater at home.
or you could stay here and watch the Inglorious Pastords back for season 18, episode 5, which took a minute to get
So,
to.
are we doing now a monthly podcast? Or we want to what?
Well,
Because it's we're in your travel season, so
we're trying
you
to
tell
stay.
me when we're going to meet again.
We are trying to stay weekly. So obviously next week's not going to happen. No,
And the last 3 weeks were a fail.
no. Next week is going to happen. Next week is going to happen because I don't leave for Patagonia until Thursday.
Oh, good. And
So
I think I'll be here.
you'll
So
think you'll be here. So
I'm always here.
Bruce took about 4 weeks off the grid, which was good for me. It was good for my mental and emotional health. A
Was
bit
it?
of a bit of a sabbatical.
You look good.
I should look good. I was out in the sun a lot.
But now as a part of this though, kind of fun. I mean, like you've changed some life rhythms. But
Yeah. So
you want to talk about
So for our listeners will love this because for the
Okay.
listeners, you can't see me, but I look fabulous. But for those who are watching, it's already obvious to you. So yeah, for 4 weeks, I like radically adjusted my diet, took all breads out of it. Then,
Okay, we took breads out.
then 2 weeks later, took out sugars.
Okay.
Then reduced alcohol considerably. Like I had literally bought, I've never done this in my life, a 12 pack of non-alcoholic beer. I don't even know what that is.
I don't even know you.
I'm just like, I don't even know who you are. So, and I started working out again. So, like October 4th, I started working out and taking care of my body, and all of that in an effort for me to get a little reset. So, a sabbatical, the idea is you're not working like, like you're typically working. So, I took all my counseling and coaching clients and said, hey, I just need to take a little break here.
That's great.
But, I realized this has been a heck of a year, Raj.
We have had a wild
Right.
Mr. Toad's wild ride.
Starting in January, February, we're all in the doctor's office with dad. He gets a pancreatic cancer diagnosis
That was this year.
this year. You got weeks or months to live. So we're scrambling. All right, what are we going to do with mom and how all that's going to work out? And then we get together on Mother's Day, and then Father's Day was the last. Oh no, we have a celebration of life for dad
Right. So February,
in
we
February.
get the diagnosis January. We
Got,
say we better
we better do
say
something.
the things that matter to dad. So let's have a family gathering, as many who can come in. We did that in
Yep.
February. And we're thinking, Dad's probably not going to make Mother's Day, certainly not going to make Father's Day, except he
He
did.
does.
And he's clear. And so on Father's Day, we actually,
Well, and let's go back just
yeah.
because this is an important.
Oh,
Look,
yes.
around Mother's Day, mom got this mysterious cough because she'd already had it like 4 weeks by the time we got to Father's Day. Do you remember that?
That's
Because the
right.
girls were like, she's had
Yes.
this thing for like 4 weeks.
Okay.
So we get together on Father's Day, pick it up there.
Right. And we're just thanking God we have a family gathering. Maybe five of the siblings
Mhm.
are able to be there.
And I left like the day later.
For dad. We're being there for dad.
Yep.
And mom would die 4 days later.
Yeah. I flew out to Peru like a day later after we had that great get together.
Right.
Mom passes suddenly, complications related to that cough, passes suddenly. I'm in Peru, can't be there, which I realized that created a lot of grief for me. That did create partly because I wanted to see all the people, all the people, and I saw them via video, but just to see all the mom and dad's friends coming from around the country to be there for dad.
Right. So the technology allowed you to see that, but it
Yeah,
also brought in this other kind of grief. I'm missing that.
I'm missing that, and because a few people forgot that I was there, and we're supposed to tell people why I wasn't there. The rest of the people, all the people thought that Bruce was kicked out of the family or dead, one or the other. We're not sure.
He
But
just wouldn't come for his mother's
this will
funeral.
fly
They
across
just were.
hemispheres to get back for mom's funeral. And then, oh gosh, I can't remember what all was going on. I did a lot of traveling this summer. Then we get dad's declining, dad's declining. I can't, was it
Finally, yeah,
August 7th I come in? And Marlene had mentioned it. She had said, I think you need to go and be with your dad.
yeah.
I'm like, really? Because I was never the person that felt like I need to be there when they die or when they pass. But it looked, I mean, hospice had been thinking for 2 days that he was going to pass, and my sisters were worn out because they're staying up with him all night and all of this. So I came in and I was surprised they took me up on it, but I said, why don't you girls take a break? I will stay with dad tonight. And they were,
I am
I I think
surprised.
really they were shot. And then I stayed with dad and I asked God to wake me up when dad passes, if he passes, and at 4:58,
You did?
dad passed. And it was a weird 10 minutes. I stayed in the room with him just 10 minutes, just sort of looked at him and I was like, it's the end of an era. And I know we've talked about all that. So
But
going,
yeah.
but I literally then we did his funeral on a Sunday or Monday. I think it was Monday. And then I flew out for Iceland. So it's like my world has just been boom, 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 boom. There's no time to really grieve or even process the loss or the difference.
And throw in um, our nephew Nate, so brother
Yeah.
David's
Oh my
son, is
gosh.
almost killed. He's hit
Yeah.
by a car.
As a
Well,
pedestrian,
as a pedestrian, really miraculously, not unlike your
dragged into the
son
vehicle. Right. It's
a
crazy.
few years ago, shouldn't be. So we're just so all of these things are taking a toll. You know, there's things that are
Yeah.
we're in a political season, which is I'm just, it's taking a
That's
toll.
devastating for everyone.
And we knew even coming in. I'm just saying all the things when you were saying this has been a year.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you take a sabbatical, um, which by the way, I mean, like, is that something what you recommend people doing? And if so, how do you do that?
I highly recommend it. Well, here you have to make decisions about what's urgent and what's important. Because urgent things will keep you from ever taking a sabbatical. There's always urgent things. This needs, I mean, I'm surprised at how my brain works on, I have to get this done. I
Sure.
have to get this next thing done. And then I'm like, I'll step back. I'm like, is the world going to end if I don't do that? No. Let's bring it in a little. Is my world going to end if I don't do that? No. Is the world of the people close to me going to end if I don't do that? No. In other words, what happens for me is when you get away and you take a sabbatical, you begin to see what's important. So part of, I journaled like 70 pages, and I haven't journaled in a long time.
Wow.
And I journaled again this morning, journaled about 70 pages, and some of that is just writing out, it's sort of processing life, but you're processing it out in a written form, which for me is helpful. It's almost like I'm thinking about it more deeply. I was reading twice yesterday and today that Mary would ponder things in her heart. She would store them away and she would ponder them, which is to think deeply about them.
Hmm.
And I think if she was a journaler, she would have journaled a lot of those things. But
Yep.
I was journaling my life and and kind of where my life story is and kind of where I am with God, where I am with friendships, where I am with marital relationship, where I am with my children and grandchildren, where I'm
Yep.
with my work um, and ministry, which I try not to make a big delineation there. So I recommend it. I think you have to decide it's important enough to take time. If you decide it's important, it may not be urgent to take a sabbatical. But I knew for me emotionally, I was just fading. I mean, emotionally, I was just fading. And I'm like, I
Okay.
can't keep counseling other people when I'm experiencing so much grief and so much sorrow, and I'm not able to even mitigate that in this season. I can't
Yep.
manage that. So getting away um, was extremely good. And writing as much as I did, I will say this after about 3 weeks, and maybe I was a little stir crazy, like I'm ready to get back to, I'm ready to get back to doing things.
Because I mean, yours was okay. I'm just getting off, like you used it, off the grid. So
Yeah.
I'm stepping in totally out of my routines, all of my,
Yep.
um, and I've read more than a few people who have talked about the value of that, of, and it's not that everyone can do that.
I know. I know.
It's a grace actually that you could. I think are some people like financially. I mean, that's just zero. It's not a matter they like probably couldn't do that, but you were able to do that, and there is something about just totally
Yeah.
getting away. I had read recently or listened to an interview with a guy who had gone for several weeks to a monastery, no phone. And so, okay, I'm just going to, it was his version of what you're talking about, but he was like, I'm going to get off the technological grid. I'm going to get off, um, and interestingly, like he said, like the first few days with like without a phone, he was like having panic attacks. It was like disorienting. What do I do? But much as you journaling, then you start taking notes, you start paying attention to things. What are the things I'm attached to,
Yeah.
and why? Why does this matter? So why even does my phone? Well, now and now I've got nothing but time to think about and reflect, wrestle with why. And boy, but having the time to go long enough,
Yeah. And
you just go deeper than you would just go.
and when you change your routines, it gives you a chance to change your routines. In other words, part of the reason I was able to do certain disciplined things in that season was because I was out of my all of my normal routines. I didn't have to be at the office at a certain time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I didn't have to be back at home at a certain time.
Yep.
I was able to stop all my existing routines and establish a whole new routine. So I want to get up early. I want to have coffee. I want to spend time with Jesus. I want to journal. Then I'm going to go work out. And then I'm going to come back and eat whey protein. And then for lunch, I'm going to have a salad. I mean, it was interesting. It's so much easier to change your routines when you completely change your routine, when you get outside the routine. And then the other thing that I learned on this sabbatical is one discipline motivates, encourages, makes space for another discipline. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? So being able to eliminate bread, which was not that hard, eliminating sugar, much harder, because I'm just shooting, particularly at night. I get that munchies for sweets, you know. So what I started doing was having a dill pickle at night when I wanted a sweet. I know it doesn't sound like it would work, but what your brain is wanting is something, some sort of.
I apologize to our listeners for that.
Anyway, there's just it works, and I realized. So this is the other thing. There was a great, so much to talk about. A great meme, just a short video clip by a lady that was speaking somewhere. She said the success in the first half of your life will come from your passion. She said success in the latter part of your life will come from discipline. I'm like, she nailed it.
Huh.
Because when I remember rocket science and all that, it was passion. That is just my passion for God, passion for people, passion for the church. You know, the church at Hampton Cove, Renown, Cove Church, all of those years, it was literally, it was passion that drove it. As I've gotten older and now 60, I realize she nailed it. Success in the second half of your life will become as a result of discipline.
Okay.
Because I'm like, oh, that maybe that's even part of why because there's so many disciplines we need to engage in our lives. Even the disciplines of how we relate. Because one of the things that Marlene and I have been talking about a lot in the last several weeks are the discipline of how we communicate with each other. In other words, we choose to be gracious, we choose to be kind, we choose to think the best, we choose gentleness. But we almost had to get out of a rhythm to establish a new rhythm for that to happen, a discipline for that to happen. So anyway, it's that particular statement. I'm like, all right, what are the areas that I need to continue to be disciplined in so that success, I mean, I don't even like that word. Success is so hard to, disrupt. But it's even like before we came on, what are we going to do with our lives?
Mm-hmm.
So if I say a life stewarded well is going to come as a result of discipline. Mm-hmm. So that's what I'm looking for. So now I'm in a season, I've had a reset, and I won't go back to counseling for another 2 weeks. So I've got, because I got a Patagonia trip coming up.
Yep.
Before I reestablish the rhythm of coming in this office, I'm like, what are the other rhythms or disciplines that need to be engaged? So I'm making sure that I'm stewarding my life well. Yeah. Not just because I got into it. I was literally in a place where I was just living. Life was just happening. And not in a bad way, in the sense, good things were happening. Still doing some speaking and teaching the way of Christ in the wilderness and doing counseling. But in so many areas, largely just being undisciplined.
Well, so I'm going to So the interesting thing that I've learned about myself,
Yep.
okay, first of all, I'm like you, and I think probably most of us are. If you're not, fine. But for me, I have found when I start working on a particular discipline, it makes the next discipline easier.
Yeah.
And I build on that. But I've also discovered the reverse is true.
Oh, you're going to go there.
No, but no, it's what you're talking about. When one
Yeah,
thing I
blanket
start to
Roger.
let go,
Yeah.
when discipline starts to fade in, well, now it tends to go to another area. And it
It
tends to go
gradually
to,
infects these other areas.
it's like, just like a spirit of discipline develops discipline, a spirit of indiscipline leads to more.
Indiscipline.
I think it's how we drift. I mean, maybe it's the definition of drift.
Roger, that is brilliant.
Well, it's just what's
No, it's so
just
interesting, but this
part of my
happens a
life.
lot. I'll have this insightful thing, and then you'll give us the other side of the coin. It's the same coin.
It is.
It's like when we talked about joy. I'm like, joy, all these great places. Where I was like, hey, let's talk about the other side of the coin. We're in deep sadness. We find joy. And I'm like, yeah, I wasn't going to go there, but thank you, Raj. But that's a great word. When I tend to be undisciplined in other areas, let's say I'm not being disciplined about when I go to bed. I might watch TV forever, whatever that is. Well, then I'm typically not as disciplined about getting up a certain time either.
Yep.
Till I have to.
Right.
I've got to get up by 6:30 because I have to leave by 7 to be here by 8. Which means I'm probably not going to have time to read scripture. Just time with Jesus or journal or oh, that's good.
And then I think the other thing
Mm.
that God has reminded me of is I think growth is actually the back and forth indiscipline and discipline, indiscipline and discipline, where I start to 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. That there's this moment in the last couple of days that where God is our progress forward always involves some failures, always involves some going backwards, always involves. I remember for points in my life where I just thought it was an all or nothing. God was calling me to follow him flawlessly. This is where he wanted to get me to.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced of that anymore. That on this side, there is this promise about the completion of the redemption, but that means it's always incomplete here. And it means it's always some moving forward, some moving back. So what's good for me is not getting too discouraged about the fails, the fall shorts,
The indisciplines.
the indisciplines. The only bad thing is just when I stop trying.
Right.
When I
When you,
this is
when
this
you
is
allow indiscipline to lead to indiscipline that leads to indiscipline that leads to avoid.
or failure and I quit
Yeah.
without saying no, failure actually is part of how we learn.
Right.
It's part of how, seeing how I drift into indiscipline. Oh, that's yeah.
Well, I'm saying, and that dovetails in something else I was thinking about this morning, that over and over again in the New Testament, we're told to be self-controlled. And then when you look at the fruits of the Holy Spirit, in other words, one of the powers, one of the superpowers that the Holy Spirit gives us is self-control.
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't that interesting? So that, and I don't think we talk about that enough. In other words, we use the word, here's what I'll say. The word discipline has an ominous, almost negative sound to it. Like, you got to be, because when we think of disciplining our children, it's this idea that there's punishment.
Yes.
I mean, a negative connotation. But if I think of self-control, I'm thinking, how important is that? Just in all of life. Self-control over my thoughts, self-control over my words, self-control over my actions, self-control over how much I have to drink, self-control over when I get up in the morning, self-control. I mean, there's,
right.
And this is something it's a superpower that the Spirit gives us. It's not that one person has it and another person doesn't. It's available to all of us. And I realize maybe that's just part of the season that God had to take me in to Bruce, you've let some discipline areas lapse. So now you're going to need to regain self-control. Even I remember when we would teach Zach, a particularly emotional self-control, we would say, okay, you need to regain self-control. We would say self-control. The idea was, I'm like, we were teaching that to our child when he was 3 and 4 and 5 years old, and God is still teaching it to me. It's like God's going, hey, Bruce, self-control, self-control. I'm like, okay. So anyway, I'm thrilled that we have that available to us. But I do want our listeners to know, and it's what I've been saying for years, when New Year's resolutions and all that. If you'll start, if you'll change one thing, if you're saying that if there's one discipline you want to engage, just focus on that. Don't try to engage the 8 things that you need to be doing, the indisciplines that you've let go. What's the one thing? Like for me, again, it started with just going to eliminate bread. And some of that was just because I noticed my tummy was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, I do love me some bread.
And on that note, I think this is the brilliance of God. Like, this is why none of us changes. And God's got all kinds of things to work on in me.
Yeah.
He's not going to do all those today.
Wouldn't that be nice, though?
Well, we want it to be that way. Fix it. Yeah,
Fix it.
No, he's more likely going to work on one thing. What's the thing the Spirit, and I think that's part of what we need to lean into. What today, if I'm looking at all the places where I need help,
Yeah.
like that's disheartening. What does God want to work on? And I wonder, Bruce, you might remember the I don't remember the reference, but
well, I won't either.
Add to your faith this,
Mhm.
add to your, and I wonder if you see there's
And so all of these things add up.
right. This very thing you're talking about is do this, then add this,
Roger,
then add that. He doesn't.
He
It's
doesn't
almost
use
like
multiplication.
do all the fruits of the Spirit today all at once. It's that you're no. Okay. And I don't know. I don't think he's giving a particular order because you can even say, okay, love.
No, he's giving us an illustration.
He's giving us an illustration.
And I think it's great that it's an addition illustration.
It's an addition illustration.
Yeah.
It's a build one block at a time.
It's something I was teaching right before the last message I did before I went on sabbatical. I was teaching about this reality of giving and being generous and stewarding our life well, even financially. And there's a sense in you feel like when we give something away, it's subtraction.
Yep.
And yet Jesus says, seek my kingdom, my righteousness, and all of these other things will be, I love the word he says, added. God's just adding those things. There's so much. When we don't talk in 4 weeks, there's so much to catch up on.
But that add to your faith. It's the word add again.
Right.
Add this. But even there's the beauty of not trying to do too much. It's not trying to, even Jesus,
yes.
Oh, today we're going to work on the disciples' faith. We're work on their racism.
Now we're gonna work on their arrogance.
Arrogance,
who's gonna be greatest,
right? And we're gonna keep coming back to that, which is still that. Even the keep coming back. This is how it's why I'm more convinced than ever that growth is a back and forth. Because there's no point where you look at disciples where Jesus says, "Oh, you guys have finally arrived at humility."
No, Jesus tried to teach them 3 times about the whole greatness thing. He gave them an illustration each time, and they were not getting it.
And it's even more than 3, because I look, okay, there's the 3 specific arguments.
Yeah.
Then there's the whole James and John and their mother bringing up the thrones thing.
Right.
That's also in the same family.
Same genre. Yep.
Right. And anyway, so, but why don't we look and say, like, their growth was always a combination of success and failure, that they were growing over time.
Yes.
But it wasn't like after 3 years with Jesus. Where I want to go in mind is after 3 years with Jesus, they're going
to be there.
They're going to have it all right. Nope. Not for disciples, not for us today.
And so maybe the great prayer that we can pray every day is, hey, Jesus, I'm going to walk with you today. What's the one thing you want to work on? I mean, because what's the one thing you know that I need?
and then avoid. Try me on another one.
Yeah. No, let's not. I don't want to work on that one. Let's work on something else.
Forgiveness.
Well, and you might not, you might even be surprised how he reveals it to you.
Yeah.
That thing you need to work on. Like I'll notice it when I'm driving and all of a sudden I get really frustrated, irritated at another driver. And it's almost like God says, "Hey, Bruce, let's evaluate what you're feeling internally right now.
Right.
Let's talk about how silly that is." Because again, I'm still in this space where I'm trying to ruthlessly eliminate hurry. It's so hard. It's so hard. I love to hurry. I love it so much.
Well, listening to my daughter Carrie teach
Yeah.
a week ago in church, um, she brought up this idea that God can take us into a storm, but the storm reveals our idol. The storm reveals what we're trusting in.
Oh.
So you're talking about what can surface something that needs to, like, God can literally, by His grace, take me into a challenge, which now is going to reveal something that needs work. It's going to reveal this is just one example of why am I so fearful in this storm? Well, some idol, something I'm trusting is being threatened here.
Yeah.
And much as you said, it's parking long enough then to listen and hear, to dig a little deeper. Why am I so angry? Well, because I'm trusting this. Well, why am I trusting? Why does this matter so much to me? Why was this person's word about me particularly um, grieving? Or now there's something, what am I,
Yeah.
what nerve did they touch?
Yep.
And this is where, when we're parking with Jesus, we start doing that packing, that unlayering, but it does require time. It's the beauty of a long kind of Sabbath, but I think it's also points to the beauty and the importance of weekly Sabbath and daily Sabbath, where I'm sitting long enough to ask more than one question.
Say that again. That's really good. Daily Sabbath. No one talks about that, Roger. I've never heard anyone talk about that.
Well, here's what's interesting. And I think it's the brilliance of God, once again. He teaches us weekly Sabbath,
Yep.
which I still struggle with. Can I take a day out of a week off? I don't think you can even necessarily get to where you're even wrestling with, can I take a week or multiple weeks off,
Yeah.
until I've learned the discipline of daily Sabbath.
Oh my gosh.
But when I learn the value of daily Sabbath and go the other way, pardon me, of weekly Sabbath, they can't go the other way, where I realize, like, what happens on my Sabbath day, or that time I set apart, which a core part of that is sitting long enough to evaluate my life, to listen to God in my life. Um, well, when I realize how critical that is on a day of the week, it has moved in reverse for me to, I've got to have that every day. I've got to have this centering time where I have enough time to ask more than one question. Enough time to, why am I so angry? Or that's why am I discouraged right now? But now you need more questions. That's never, one question is never enough.
No, and you talk about, and it's something I talked to Marlene about, because I introduced her to the five whys. And the fifth why. In other words, like you've talked about in your face cast before, it's like being an annoying child. But why? But why? But why? But the importance of it is it keeps you from just surface level. Oh, I'm angry because traffic is backed up and I can't get through. There's some kind of block going.
That's way too simple. Right.
Yeah, so why does that bother you?
Why?
Well, because I feel like I should have the road all to myself.
Or I'll be late.
Why do you feel that?
Well,
Okay,
why?
yeah, exactly.
Why? Well, and it's going to be different reasons for different people.
Is it what other people think?
There's an
Is
image
it,
thing.
huh?
Is there? I've always been
Why do I worry about
this
it?
good person. I always, what people are going to, is it I'm not going to be productive. I'm losing time. Well, now why is that? You ask enough whys, you're going to get to ultimately probably something I'm trusting too much or something that I haven't handed over to God
Something that hasn't been surrendered.
or something I've never even thought about.
Right.
I haven't asked enough questions to even.
And Roger, and I think we might be surprised at how many of us, and I'm going to include myself, haven't even thought about certain things that we need to be thinking about because we don't give time for that. So it's interesting that we were finishing right here because I was writing out. I'm in Luke now, and twice in that space it talked about Mary treasuring these things
Yeah.
and pondering them, and I'm like, so I looked up ponder to think deeply, to meditate on. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I do enough pondering. I think about some things, but to think deeply about something, I think she's going, what is God up to? Why did this have to be so hard? All of everything about the birth of Christ was just a horror story. There was nothing about it. You go, that's so sweet. Like you put your baby in a little manger, feeding trough, because none of your family would let you stay with them at the inn because you were ostracized. I mean, and she's having the baby. There are water breaks while she's on the dawn. I mean, the whole thing is just awful. And then, of course, Luke doesn't even talk about the Magi coming, Herod trying to kill the baby, the flight to Egypt, becoming refugees in another country for perhaps a couple of years before you can even get back to your homeland.
Yep.
And Mary's pondering these things. Yeah, I mean, we need time to ponder. I need time to ponder daily Sabbath. So I know, like I was up at 5 this morning, and between 5 and 6, I get to have this time with Jesus and Doug because I have to take Doug out for walk. Doug is our dog, by the way.
Jesus and
Jesus and Doug. They get that first hour. But what I hadn't thought of it as was a daily Sabbath, because the Sabbath day in the Old Testament was a day devoted unto the Lord. It wasn't just a day not to work.
Right.
It was a day devoted unto the Lord. So what is there an hour that we can devote unto the Lord? As I finished Mark, Jesus was like, could you guys not watch with me for 1 hour? Could you not pray? Isn't it interesting?
And here's the thing.
I'm like the early disciples. I'm ready to move on to the next thing.
And I think this is part of the beautiful use of the term watch and pray.
Yeah.
Is because I think I've often just thought watching is what I'm doing when I'm not saying words.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm paying attention. I'm wrestling with why this matters. I'm listening. I'm asking. It's the sitting with God, and I love that. Could you not 1 hour? Because I do think I'm not putting a magic, but if you think about an hour in a day is enough time to ask more than one question. There's time
Yeah.
to sit with something and quiet. And I've found now this is where I've gotten like I almost feel like, and this is the shift for me, is like I have to have daily Sabbath. I've come around now. I don't have any rest. Much of my life, or a good part of my life, there was I need to have this. I ought. There was an ought. I ought to be having this quiet time with God. My thing now is I have to. Like I've learned enough about like these times to ask the questions and to sit to dare I say watch and pray, to listen and pray, to not have music and something else going, to often for me it's outside. It's where I tend to just see and hear God better.
Yep.
But I have gotten to where I think the words of the old Carpenter song, I won't last a day without you. That I've literally, it's not, I need to have, I mean, I ought to. It's like anymore, I have to. And that hour or so, which is different, and mine is almost always in the morning, it's the centering, it's the reorienting, it's the assessing my failures and giving them back to God. It's what am I burdened about today? What am I trusting too much? Where am I? It's listening, it's thanking, it's I can't make it without it.
That's good. So instead of thinking about a sabbatical, although some of you, God might prompt you to take a sabbatical, and I'm saying if there's a way to do it, I would encourage you to do it. A significant amount of time off work, just
Right.
away with God. But I'm more intrigued by this idea of daily Sabbath, which I had never thought of, because there is a component of that of resting in God,
Yes.
centering on God. Because
Yes.
when I center on God and I can rest in God because I'm trusting God, I can ask the wise when I'm finding I'm not trusting God something, or I'm worried about something,
Yep.
or I'm frustrated by something, ask the wise, and then and it leads me back to the rest of God.
Yes.
I can give this to God. I can surrender this to God. I can have rest. I've answered the whys. I've asked certain. Ooh, this is good. This could be one of our better podcasts.
Provided there's sound.
Oh no.
Provided technology.
Well, the blue light's on, Rob. So I feel like there's at least a chance that we have sound.
That we have inflicted this on someone.
Someone has been inflicted with a sabbatical or a daily Sabbath or self-control. So Roger's going to end it with a ditty now.
Well, a ditty. How about
Nothing rhymes with Sabbath, in case you're wondering.
I can't come up with a ditty because I'm not that witty.
When you're put to the test, just take a rest.
Let's go with that.
Okay. Until next week, when, well, I can't promise you we'll be back, but Lord willing, we'll be back. It's 50-50, really. I agree with Roger. I don't even know. I can't see anything. Where are we?
How do we turn ourselves off?